Hello everyone, my name is Sam and welcome to the worst and best of David Lynch. Today we'll be going through all 10 of David Lynch's feature films from worst to best. This list will not include the Twin Peaks television series, as if it was on this list, it would be at number 1. That is because Twin Peaks happens to be my favourite television show of all time.
Hi David, thanks for talking to us. My question just is, good, thank you. My question just is, what inspired you to make Laura such a complex and deeply sad character?
I have no idea.
David Lynch is one of the most polarizing directors of all time. There are many people who think that his work is absolute genius, and there are many people that think his work is absolute trash. It's my belief that not all Lynch's films are perfect, but they are so unique and so different that they take you on an experience that aren't really like any other films out there. And so to discredit his work as absolute trash, I just think is not accurate. His films are very unique, they are very special, and anyone who's passionate about film should really be taking a look at David Lynch and seeing what he's all about. David Lynch should absolutely be regarded as artist first, director second. Anyway, enough talk, let's begin this list. At number 10 we have David Lynch's third film, Dune. This is the kind of film that sounds great on paper. Great story, great cast, great director. But looking back on the history of this film and the development hell that it went through, it's really no surprise that it was a bit of a shamble of a film. Dune was originally meant to be directed by Alejandro Jodorowsky, who's directed these two films. There is a documentary called Jodorowsky's Dune, which goes into details about that experience. But onto David Lynch's Dune, the pacing is just all over the place. The performances are wooden and stale and lifeless. Sometimes the presentation of the film can be a little bit odd. There's always some narration going on with the thoughts of the characters, which just really interrupt the flow of a scene. For those who are experiencing Dune for the first time, I don't really feel that this film effectively communicates the ideas and the worlds effectively. We're sort of left a little bit confused and uninvested in what's happening. On the positives of this film, the effects are pretty decent for their time, and the art design and costumes of this film are really cool. Overall, the film's a bit of a mess, but it's not the worst thing I've ever seen. I'd give it a 5 out of 10. Next we have Inland Empire. And to me, this film just seems like an incredibly ambitious experiment. This is easily one of the most polarizing David Lynch films. There are some that think that it's absolutely genius, that it's his best work, and there are some that think it's absolutely abysmal. For me personally, I'm somewhere in the middle. Empire really requires an extreme amount of patience. The runtime is 3 hours long, and there is no real clear narrative. Not even the cast of this film, upon the film's release, really knew what the story was. David Lynch would literally write down the script for a certain scene on the day and then shoot that scene. So this sort of incoherency that the film presents, you may think that it works against the film. I feel that it actually enhances the film because it really adds to this sort of dreamlike effect with one scene flowing into the next, and although they're completely different, it just feels right. Because although this film is 3 hours long, I wouldn't say that the flow or the pacing is really that bad. And because this film feels so dreamy, by the end of it, I feel like I've experienced a nightmare. If anyone asked me, hey Sam, put on a film that makes me feel like I'm watching a nightmare, I'd put on Inland Empire. Despite how exhausting this film can be to really get through, it really sticks with you long after the credits have rolled. If you're just starting to get into David Lynch, I would not recommend starting here. As for me personally, this is actually one of the last David Lynch films that I watched. Inland Empire is very difficult to consume, but it leaves you very satisfied in the end. I'd give this film a strong 6 to a light 7. Next up we have Blue Velvet. Now I know that there'll be a lot of Blue Velvet fans out there that'll be shocked that this film is so far down on the list, but in my opinion, this is easily David Lynch's most overrated film. Now looking back on Blue Velvet, what is so important about this film is that it really set a new direction for David Lynch. The film establishes a lot of mystery and a lot of intrigue. This film is about small town America with a lot of hidden secrets. But almost all of the themes and ideas that Blue Velvet presents, I feel were later perfected in Twin Peaks. Isabella Rossellini is pretty fantastic as this mysterious jazz singer. Kyle MacLachlan is as charming as always, but the thing about his character Jeffrey, his motives are very unclear and underdeveloped, and if you think about them for too long, it kind of doesn't make any sense. Dennis Hopper as the villain, he's very scary and he's very physically intimidating, but he's not as cold and as calculating as some other villains in Lynch's films. So despite the film's flaws, I still feel it's a very entertaining watch, and it is certainly not a bad place to start if you're wanting to get into David Lynch. I'd give Blue Velvet a strong 6 to a light 7. Next we have Wild at Heart. I feel that this is David Lynch's most charming film. So we follow Lula and Sailor, played by Laura Dern and Nicolas Cage. Sailor breaks his parole and they go for a road trip. The chemistry between Laura Dern and Nicolas Cage is so fantastic, you really believe they're an actual couple. Wild at Heart is absolutely littered with all these strange and crazy characters that are so fun to watch. Willem Dafoe plays one of the most disgusting villains I've ever seen. The thing about Wild at Heart is that it's just fun to watch. I mean, as Nicolas Cage, you know you're in for a treat. The only real negatives I have with this film is that there are a lot of flashback scenes which sometimes can interrupt the pacing, but they don't really take anything away from the film. Also, there are a heap of Wizard of Oz references. Sometimes it can be just a little bit too much, but otherwise Wild at Heart is just a great time. I'd give this film a decent 7 out of 10. At number 6 we have The Straight Story. This is an incredibly heartwarming film, and much like the title suggests, this is a story about a man named Alvin Straight who travels 240 miles to see his ailing brother who had just had a stroke. But he didn't just do this in a car, he did it on a lawnmower. So not only is this about a man named Straight, this film, unlike a lot of David Lynch's films, is a very straightforward story. What is so great about The Straight Story is that we as an audience feel like we're really sitting down and, just like the other characters in the film, we are listening to Alvin tell us these stories about his life. There is really just so much to be gained from these stories. It just makes you feel like after watching it, like you're going to become a better person. This film just seems to be so forgotten though, even amongst David Lynch fans. Just to get this Blu-ray, I had to order it from Germany, of all places. I do not believe that there is a Blu-ray release in the UK or America, or certainly not Australia. So if you get the opportunity, definitely check this film out and hopefully we can breathe some new appreciation into The Straight Story. Strong 7 out of 10. At number 5 we have Twin Peaks Fire Walk With Me. When I saw this movie for the first time, I started playing it at midnight and it was just the perfect time to watch this film. Now, if you dive into this film after just watching the first 2 seasons of Twin Peaks, you might be left with a bad taste in your mouth. That was certainly the experience with me, and although I knew that the film was good, it just felt wrong. It was only until my second viewing of Fire Walk With Me that I really realized what a gem of a horror film this really is. This film is just a complete contrast to the television show. We move away from this very cheery and quirky tone to one that is just filled with dread and horror. It becomes truly the stuff of nightmares. And I feel that it is because of this contrast that Fire Walk With Me didn't really do that well critically or commercially. Audiences were just expecting the same thing that they got from the show, but that's not what this film is out to achieve. This change in tone really makes sense. We're not following Dale Cooper anymore, a very light-hearted, optimistic individual. We're following Laura, a tormented, broken, depressed person. And this departure is seen from the very opening shot with a television being smashed. This is no longer the Twin Peaks we once knew. And despite us all, if you've watched the show, knowing what the outcome of the events in this film are going to be, there is still a great sense of dread and suspense. The performances, especially from the members of the Palmer family, are all fantastic. Frank Silva as Bob is as scary as ever. In my opinion, the only thing that really holds Fire Walk With Me back is the dependence on the audience to have seen the original series to really gain the most meaning out of this film. Additionally, the first part of the film with Chris Isaac and Kiefer Sutherland it can really feel just like a different film altogether. But in conclusion, I feel that Fire Walk With Me is absolutely worth your time. Do check out the original Twin Peaks series before you go into it though. And if you watch the Missing Pieces compilation film, which came out in 2014, it just adds to the experience. Definitely a light 8 out of 10. Lost Highway, we pull away from small town America. We're done with Blue Velvet, we're done with Twin Peaks, we're now moving to LA. I don't really want to talk about Lost Highway too much. It's just one of those films where you just got to go into it blind and just see what happens. I mean, the Blu-ray itself doesn't really tell you anything about the film. All it really tells you is that it's a psychogenic fugue with a great soundtrack and a great cast of actors, which is true, but that should be a pretty big implication that you should just go into Lost Highway and just see what happens. The fact that it's so high on my list should be a pretty big indicator to you as well that it is a very good film. Although there are a lot of elements of Twin Peaks that are weird, Lost Highway sort of brings it back to Lynch's roots and really makes you delve inside of your own mind to figure out what is actually going on. It is a truly cerebral experience that makes you question, is what I'm seeing actually happening? The President of the United States himself, Bill Pullman, is fantastic in this film. Robert Blake just gets under your skin as the mystery man. Robert Blake was actually tried and acquitted for the murder of his wife, and given the events of this film, it really adds a dimension to the viewing experience that is incredibly creepy. Yeah, I don't really want to say anything more on Lost Highway. I think you should just definitely check it out. Go in with an open mind and see what happens. I would give Lost Highway a decent 8 out of 10. In number 3, we have The Elephant Man. This is David Lynch's second feature-length film. Elephant Man was incredibly successful. It received 8 Oscar nominations. This is easily Lynch's most emotional film. If this film doesn't make you cry, or at least doesn't make you want to cry, I doubt you have a soul. A completely unrecognizable John Hurt plays Joseph Merrick, who in the film is renamed John Merrick. I don't know why, but let's just go with it. Merrick had some incredibly extreme deformities which led him to be in the circus. It's not until a doctor, played by Anthony Hopkins, finds him and takes him to a hospital where he is able to receive the treatment and the care that he deserves. Even though this film came out in 1980, the film's black and white presentation makes you feel like you've gone back in time to the late 1800s and you're a fly on the wall just witnessing these events happening. Even though this is a more traditional film, there are still elements of David Lynch that can be seen throughout. For example, there is still a very dark and murky industrial aesthetic. Kenny Baker is also in this film, so that's pretty cool. It is incredibly moving, it is incredibly touching, and I would recommend this film to absolutely anyone. I would give Elephant Man a very strong 9 out of 10. We are almost at the end. At number 2, we have Mulholland Drive. This was originally meant to be a television series much like Twin Peaks. However, it was rejected and David Lynch took it and instead made a masterpiece. Mulholland Drive can be seen as being similar to Lost Highway. It's set in LA. It is incredibly dreamlike. However, what Mulholland Drive does, which Lost Highway doesn't do, is that unlike Lost Highway, which just takes your hand and takes you for a ride, Mulholland Drive makes you want to know more. It makes you want to dig deeper. It makes you so much more invested in what's happening. Although the characters in Lost Highway are cool, we actually care about the characters in Mulholland Drive. Not only does Mulholland Drive make you want to dig deeper to truly figure out what's going on, this film has so much more to offer. It is funny, it is mysterious, it is scary. The film also offers a light commentary on the state of Hollywood itself. I really do agree with what Roger Ebert said at the time, and I'm paraphrasing here, but basically it was along the lines of, although Mulholland Drive may not make all that much sense when watching it, there is still just something so captivating and engaging about it. It just works. It really does require multiple viewings, and every time you watch it, there is something new that you've discovered. It's so exciting. And as we as a society and a culture grow and evolve, so does our interpretation of this film. Now, this is the second David Lynch film that I'd ever seen, so I can't really recommend it as a first watch if you want to get into David Lynch, but if you'd seen any of his other films and you really liked it, by all means, go pick it up, go watch it. You will not regret it. absolutely, I would give Mulholland Drive a 10 out of 10. And we are finally here at the number one spot, and it's Eraserhead, David Lynch's very first feature film. Originally, Mulholland Drive was in my number one spot, but I went back, I rewatched Eraserhead, and it's just the best. Now that I've seen all of David Lynch's work, I can go back to Eraserhead and I can see its little fingerprints everywhere. Not only throughout David Lynch's future work, but in cinema in general. A great example of this, I feel, is in Darren Aronofsky's Pi. Darren Aronofsky, director of Requiem for a Dream, Black Swan. This film's visual style is so Eraserhead. I mean, if you just look at the back, you can see that there are similarities there. But my goodness, Eraserhead. There is no other David Lynch film that takes me to another world unlike Eraserhead. It is this dirty, grimy, post-apocalyptic, industrial wasteland. We follow Henry, who is played by Jack Nance, who is absolutely fantastic. If you watch David Lynch's other films, you'll always see a Jack Nance cameo here and there. Henry ends up in a bit of a sticky situation with his partner, and from there we just delve into this deep, dark and confusing world of Henry's. This film could not be in colour, it has to be black and white. The film's presentation is so dirty and murky and sick. David Lynch did the sound design himself. You always hear a chimney steaming, you'll hear the wind passing by, filled with dust and chemicals. And because it just truly takes you to another place, and you can see its impact on cinema, it just has to be number one. Definitely check this out. It was the first David Lynch film I ever saw, and I remember watching it and just thinking, what the hell did I just watch? This is something different. I want more. This film is incredibly well regarded. Stanley Kubrick himself said that this was one of his favourite films. I've read stories where Stanley Kubrick would actually play Eraserhead for the cast of The Shining just to get them in this mood of horror. Absolutely check this film out. It is the best of what David Lynch has to offer, in my opinion. A very strong and easy 10 out of 10. Thank you very much for watching. If you haven't seen any of these films, definitely check them out if any of them seem interesting to you. If your opinion differs to mine, that's great. Let me know in the comments below. I hope to make more worst and best videos in the future, definitely with more directors and even bands. Feel free to leave a like and hit subscribe. Until next time, thanks again for watching, have a lovely day, and remember, in heaven, everything is fine.